think I can hear myself.
Mine's
Oh, there we
on.
go. Okay. All right. Thank you for being here, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy evening to join our school board meeting. Before I reconvene this meeting, I just want to make note that our meeting did begin publicly at 5:45 this evening, and at that time we did approve via motions to allow Dr. Beers and Ms. Hummel to attend this meeting via electronic communication due to illness. So that's why they're not here. We have 5 board members here with us this evening, but they are with us via electronic communication. With that, I'd like to reconvene this meeting of the Williamsburg-James City County School Board. And as we do, if I can have a member certified closed session for us.
Mr. Chair, I move that the Williamsburg-James City County School Board convene. Oh, we already did that. Sorry. I think I'm on the wrong one. If somebody else has it, please go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I certify that to the best of each member's knowledge, the Williamsburg-James City County School Board, while in closed session, discussed only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements as stated in Virginia law, and that only such public matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley, for the second. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
It doesn't look like he's checked in with us just yet. We'll keep an eye on him.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mr. Dow.
Aye. And is there a motion to approve our agenda as presented this evening?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Any discussion on our agenda? All right, Ms. Aller.
Mrs. Young.
I heard an aye on my ear.
Sorry, thank you. Dr. Beers. Is he there?
He is here. Yep.
Okay. Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortego.
Aye.
Mr. Dow.
Aye. And we do have Dr. Beers with us now. Thank you all. We have an approved agenda. We're going to move on to our Pledge of Allegiance. For that, I'd like to invite Ms. Alan Parham, our local chairperson of the Williamsburg-James City County Education Association, to come to the podium. She's going to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. If we can stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Parham. Nothing like being asked at the last moment. Thank you. All right. We're going to move on to item 4.1, our announcements and superintendent's report. Dr. Herron?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we continue to celebrate Career and Technical Education Month, we want to share with you a brief video about what CTE looks like in our high school classrooms. This is a companion piece to last meeting's video about middle school CTE offerings.
Upward and onward. High school CTE courses prepare our students to transition to college and/or career with modern skills and experiences to help them succeed. From sparking interest to cooking up new opportunities, we are building experiences for bright futures. The WJCC High School CTE program forms a solid foundation, allowing students to discover, explore, and pursue next-level possibilities, becoming college and career ready while still in high school. Students apply what they've learned, putting their skills to work in real-world settings. From computer programming and marketing to health sciences and the trades, futures are bright for students at WJCC schools.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my report for this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Hare. And do any board members have a report to share?
Yes, I have a report from SEAC, Special Ed Advisory Council. They held a critical decisions point training with the VDOE, and it was very successful. They had 42 adults, 3 vendors, 22 high school volunteers to help with childcare, including a PE teacher and an art teacher. And they had a train to entertain the children. Also, we're gearing up for Disability Awareness Month in March. There will be activities that we'll hear more about next month. They're working on a panel for a panel discussion and a I'm Determined workshop. Also, there's a grant that they will be applying for with the VDOE to help 6th grade students that have special needs orientation to help them with their transition into middle school. So we're hoping to get that grant. The Exceptional Games will be returning in June. More details to follow. Our next meeting is March 9th. It is open to any citizens that would like to come. They'll be looking over the annual plan, and that will be submitted to our board in April. So we hope to see more people on March 9th, and it'll be in the annex. Thank you. That's my report.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Any other reports from members? Yeah, Ms. Ortega.
Last week, Mr. Dowell and I met with, as members of the liaison committee, we met with members from the Board of Supervisors in the city of Williamsburg. They each have 2 representatives to the liaison committee, along with Dr. Herron and Ms. Ewing, to discuss the budget and the numbers that we are all facing and working through right now. It was a very good meeting, very productive, and obviously the conversation continues, but we're working on strengthening and building our relationships with our funding partners.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. The only report that I have is I think many are aware that our board, I feel really hot up here, very loud, but board met over a retreat last Friday in Charlottesville, and it's a public meeting, of course. Really enjoyed the discussions, vivid, vibrant discussions around many topics that we had. In fact, I had an agenda laid out, and kind of showed my naivete, I think, because we didn't get to anything that I wanted to talk about. But so anyway, for our board, I would say just be on the lookout for additions to our work session so that we can get through some of those other items, in particular our standard operating procedures, looking at that as we have to do annually anyway. That does it for our announcements and board reports. If we can move on to item 5.1, recognition of student and our staff. Ms. Ortega? And Ms. Hundley, if you
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Tonight we are excited to recognize 3 teachers for their hard work and dedication to lifelong learning and continuous improvement. These individuals are newly named National Board Certified Teachers. Before we share more about this recognition, I'd like to invite the following honorees to join us up front. And I sincerely hope I pronounce your names correctly. Johanna Behrens, a special education teacher from DJ Montague Elementary School. Valerie Landers, a science teacher from Toano Middle School. And Jillian Zingale, a special education teacher from J. Blayton Elementary School. National Board Certification is a highly respected professional certification in the field of education. The outstanding teachers standing before you completed a rigorous year-long process to examine, document, and reflect upon their teaching practice and student learning. The process also included an assessment to demonstrate depth of content knowledge, pedagogy within their specialty. We are proud to welcome these 3 new National Board Certified teachers to the ranks of 57 total NBC teachers throughout the division. Congratulations to each of these outstanding teachers. And then, Mr. Chair, I would like to invite Ms. Beth Aller to the front of the room. Last week was officially School Board Clerk Appreciation Week, and so we want to publicly recognize and acknowledge our tremendous board clerk, Ms. Beth Aller. She plays an enormous role in the operation and success of everything that we do as a board. She has to keep track of countless details for all 7 of us, manage board docs, schedules, and countless other details. She is the person behind the scenes who makes all of this run smoothly. And in addition to being exceptional at her job, she is also one of the most consistently pleasant people I've ever interacted with, and I'm sure all of my board colleagues agree. Beth, we couldn't be successful without you, and we greatly appreciate you. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, that concludes recognitions.
Thank you, Ms. Ortego, and thank you, and special congratulations to our educators. Thank you for continuing your lifelong journey of becoming professionals in your own right, and thank you for choosing us as your school division to serve students in our community. And again, thank you to Ms. Aller, our board clerk. I reflect on the first time I met Ms. Aller. It was over one of these things, these computers, and I had the honor to participate along with Dr. Heron in selecting our next board clerk, and to say that she stood head, which is funny given your head and shoulders above the rest of the, anyway, so we've got a gym with Ms. Aller, so thank you for being on our team. We're going to move on to item 6, our public comments for the evening. I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Ortego.
It is at this point in our meeting where citizens are invited to address the board. Those citizens desiring to speak have submitted speaker cards to the clerk prior to the start of tonight's meeting. These speakers are asked to come to the podium when their names are called, state their names for the record, and direct their comments to the chair of the board. It is the board's interest and desire that all comments are heard and respected. Hence, the citizens are asked not to engage in applauding, verbal outbursts, or any other type of demonstrations during these presentations. Personnel matters are not considered in public meetings, therefore the board requests that all speakers refrain from making reference to specific individuals in any form or fashion. Though the board does not respond to your comments are heard and appreciated. Each speaker is allocated 1 minute and 30 seconds to make their presentation, and the board asks that you respect this time limitation. Also, please be reminded that no time may be yielded to another speaker. Your acceptance and adherence to these guidelines will be greatly appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chair. My directions are concluded.
Thank you, Ms. Aller. Who do we have? Ms. Aller, Ms. Ortego. Got Ms. Aller on the brain. Ms. Ortego.
Our first speaker is Robin Pavlovsky.
Good evening. My name is Robin Pavlovsky, and I thank you for all you guys do. I know there's a lot going on and there's a lot to juggle, so I appreciate this time to speak. I'd like to make a comment on the Village Initiative report and to offer some reflections. First, I see this as a report of people who seek answers for students who are struggling in school, and that's wonderful. We all need to figure out what's going on in our school system. I like the tutoring groups they provide, but I have some real concerns about this report. First, the research is biased, and frankly, we need to have some other perspectives. Some of the examples that I'm seeing that I'm having problems with is blaming students' parents for advocating for their children in gifted education. We all need to advocate for all the students. It's so important. And hiring certain teachers to meet this group, it's outstanding, but the data doesn't really match what they're saying. They stated a report that a certain school had really low SOL scores, but they also had the highest number of special teachers to administer to this group, so that it didn't really jive very well. Equity isn't the answer. Equity sounds good, but it hasn't improved anything. And I've spoken to other teachers. They've mentioned groups of teachers that they've spoken. Well, I've spoken to other teachers as well, and they've had this in the system for the past 6 years. And so I just ask you to kind of look at this report and really, have some understanding about it.
Thank you, Ms. Pavlovsky. Thank you. And if I can add, if you have written notes that you want to provide to the clerk and for anybody else, please do that, and the board takes those, and we'll look at those as well.
Okay.
Ms. Pavlovsky.
Jessica Anderson.
My name is Jessica Anderson, and I'm here today to discuss the inadequate pay for our educators and staff. I have to say the recent WJCC email survey we received asking whether we want a pay increase or additional hired resources was very disappointing. The reality is our district is not staffed adequately, and the current salary is not acceptable. Meeting a standard of pay will not be an incentive to retain staff, but to acquire, not only to be an incentive to retain staff, but to acquire future hires that we desperately need. This should not be an either-or question. I also want to address the conversations around merit pay. Students are not colleagues or employees to our educators. Not only does this type of policy drive a competitive and negative work environment among staff, but it also plays into the idea that if a student's refusal to do their work, or the possibility the students are dealing with issues at home or in school, making school more challenging would reflect on the educator's pay is appalling. The same people, speaking of merit pay, also believe you get what you pay for, while ignoring that our educating staff is paid 20% below the national average and 10% below the state average, while producing some of the best test scores in the state. Our educators and staff do not want a 10% pay raise. They need and deserve it. We cannot continue to see massive turnover and or mass exodus from the educator field because not only our students, but our community will be the ones to suffer. Please ensure WJCC joins the ranks of neighboring districts for paying their valued employees 10%. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Michael Hosang. Oh, that was for the last one.
Start it over for you.
Thank you. Good evening. Approximately a month ago, a teacher in Newport News was shot by one of her students. Soon thereafter, concerns were raised to our school district about a comic book series that was in our school libraries that discussed shooting a teacher. When the school system heard about this, they immediately removed these comic books from the school libraries, as they should have, as these books clearly should not have been accessible to our children. The issue was raised to the school system on a Friday, and the books were removed on a Monday. How could this be? We have been told that books will not be removed from school libraries until they go through a review committee and discussion is held with the individual or parents who raised this concern. Is it only because this book discussed the shooting of a teacher that it was removed so quickly? Again, I agree that this comic book series should never have been in our schools, and I'm hoping that you are looking into who purchased these books. But why did you not follow your own policy in this regard? Why is it that in this instance you disregarded your policy in which you seem to do only at your convenience and remove this comic book series on your own accord without a review and without a meeting? I'm also curious, what is it going to take before the school board does something regarding the pornographic books in our school libraries? You waited until a teacher was shot to remove these comic books. Are you going to wait until one of our students is raped before you decide to take these books out of our libraries? You have a duty to ensure that students don't have access to these in school, and I'm not aware of any of you taking any steps to protect our children in this regard. You only have taken a step after a teacher was actually shot. I hope you intend to do so with our students before one is sexually assaulted.
Thank you, Mr. Hosang.
Diane Doffelmeyer.
Hello, I've been a resident of James City County for the past 33 years. My 3 children graduated from Lafayette High School, and 6 of my grandchildren have attended WJC schools. I wish to address the Village Group Initiative, which the school system has adopted over the last 5 years. The school system should discontinue all association with this group. In reviewing their goals, I note that they promote the notion that you can achieve equity. Even if you could achieve equity, it is not a desirable goal because you end up sinking to the lowest common denominator in terms of student achievement in the effort to create equity for all students. Instead, we should eliminate all reference to equity and create an environment where we demand the highest standards of learning grounded in a classical education for all educators and students. We are fortunate to live in a community with many talented individuals and a great range of knowledge on many subjects. Many of these people are retired and may well consider volunteering mentor or tutor students given the opportunity. WJCC should be actively recruiting people to help students who have disadvantaged backgrounds. Instead, we don't see them really being invited into the schools. Another big problem I have with the Village Initiative is that they promote promote collectivism over individualism. This is clearly Marxist theory. I quote, "Collectivism is a political theory associated with communism. More broadly, it is an idea that people should prioritize the good of society over the welfare of the individual. This country was founded on individual rights."
Thank you, Ms. Dolphin-Meyer.
Kim McCartney.
Thank you. My name's Kim McCartney. I'm a graduate of the Coast Guard Academy, and I got my MBA from on the GI Bill from LaSalle College. I'm here because I was provided with a copy of the Initiative for Equity in Education. At first glance, it appeared to paint a pretty bleak picture of the school system in James City County, Williamsburg. But then I reviewed the resumes of the authors and realized the real agenda behind it. It is so full of grossly misleading facts, and I use that in quotes, that I would just like to point and address some of them. According to the recent census, there was 79.6 of the residents of James City County, Williamsburg were Caucasian, and 14% were African American. Yet our schools have up to 77% children of color in one school. I thought that was odd, but I checked, and that is in fact correct. But all of the other school percentages they had were at least 15% off as far as the number of non-white students in those schools. It's also interesting to note that Williamsburg, James City County apparently recognizes the problem as the school with the highest percentage of non-Caucasian children also has one of the lowest student-teacher ratios. It is ranked one of the worst in the state, however. I could go on finding gross inaccuracies and misrepresentations in this report, but I'm going to address the elephant in the room.
Again, if you have a written statement that you would like to provide to us, please do give that to Ms. Aller, and we'll take it under advisement. So thank you.
Amy Quark.
Good evening. My name is Amy Quirk. I have two children in elementary school, one of whom is here for support tonight. And I'm a member of the Village Initiative and a professor at William & Mary. First, I would like to say I support the 10% raise for all staff in our school division. They are very hardworking and certainly deserve pay with dignity. Second, I am deeply concerned by recent data from the Virginia Department of Education demonstrating that WJCC schools are falling behind state averages for SOL pass rates. A lower percentage of Black and economically disadvantaged students across the division in WJCC pass the writing SOL than their counterparts across the state. At James Blair Middle School, the situation is especially concerning. Only 36% of Black students at James Blair passed the writing SOL in 2022. And yet across the state, 47% of Black students passed that same SOL. This cannot be dismissed as simply a result of pandemic learning loss, as Black students across the state face those same challenges. This suggests an institutional problem within our division. What is the WJCC school division doing wrong that our Black students are performing so much worse than their counterparts across the state? This is a question that demands immediate answers. These inequities threaten our accreditation status and our students' futures. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Quirk.
Kara McLean.
Good evening. As the the curriculum revision for the Family Life K through 10th grade is getting ready to be brought to the school board for approval, I, as a committee member and a concerned parent, want to bring to remembrance some of the rules. First, the Williamsburg, James City County IGAH rules for Family Life say that the Virginia Board of Education guidelines and the standards of learning, not just the standards of learning, must be adhered to. Thankfully, the revision of the curriculum is following the Board of Education guidelines of Virginia Code for Family Life in adding back much abstinence-based curriculum in grades 7 through 10 and voting out some explicit older material. Besides the curriculum being an abstinence-based, I want to remind you that the Board of Education guidelines say that the curriculum must be age-appropriate and medically accurate. Also, according to the Williamsburg Policies and Virginia Code, copies of the Williamsburg Family Life Education curriculum must be viewed at any school, the Office of School Performance, and the local libraries, and a complete copy of all printed material and a description of all audio-visual material must be kept in the libraries. Having this curriculum on a OneDrive is a helpful way to have the curriculum housed, but from personal experience while doing this revision for all the grades and regarding looking at curriculum for my son's 9th grade family life class last year, seeing the curriculum in written form is much clearer and easier than looking through a file after file after file on a OneDrive. And it is also a policy of Williamsburg and the Code of Virginia to have it printed.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Thank you.
Andrew Kaysen.
Good evening. I'm Andy Kaysen, a WJCC teacher, treasurer at WJCA, and a parent. We have gathered here today to ask the board to bring a budget of need to our local funders, and WJCC employees, all employees, need a 10% raise. Our budget shortfall has decreased due to the increase in state-funded teacher raise, and more state funding could be coming down as the Virginia State and House of Delegates Virginia Senate and House of Delegates continue to reconcile their budgets. Certainly, we are in a better position than at the start of this year. We are the experts here. We know what it takes to run an all-star school district. Therefore, we should not be shy about our needs to our local funders. Let them tell us no. Let's stand fast to what our students deserve because the consequences are dire. We can already see the issues with special education positions going unfilled and James Blair undergoing academic review. Certainly, these trends will continue to grow unless we are able to retain and hire high-quality educators. Also, if you have not read the Village Initiative Equity Report already, please be sure you do. Not only does this show that the community is behind our efforts for a 10% raise and that attracting a diverse group of educators requires an increase in salaries, but the report also illustrates the inequity in our schools that need our utmost attention if we want to think of ourselves as one of the top school divisions. First, in the short term, we should participate in the William & Mary Teacher Residency Program to attract and retain teachers. I'll leave my notes with Ms. Holland. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Case.
John Slokowitz.
Good evening. I've recently read a publication presented to this board from an organization claiming deep-rooted racism in WJCC schools. I'm here today dismayed at the school district's ability to allow such blatant misinformation as it pertains to racism. Webster's dictionary defines racism as a belief that race is a fundamental determinant of human traits and capabilities, and that racial differences produce inherent superiority of a particular race. Yet you allow a presentation set forth proclaiming that race, specifically in teachers, is a fundamental determinant as to the success of the students. What happened to the best person for the job receiving that desired job? Not getting a job based on your race. The Village Initiative has insisted that black students are more prone to succeeding if they have black teachers, yet they refuse to acknowledge the fact that this very school, which has the highest percentage of black teachers in the county, has one of the lowest SOL marks in the entire state as it pertains to black students. Furthermore, why is this only prevalent in black students? Why is it that Asian students perform best when divided by race, yet they have the least amount of the same race teachers? How long are we going to entertain this organization whom year after year comes to this body with the same rhetoric of failed policy? When are we going to face the hard truth that probably the main reason for any student's lack or failures in school is a life that begins in a broken home? When are we going to accept that many students who are failing behind and never excel are victims of single-parent households with no father figure and a mom who works 2 or 3 jobs? We are going to need real problem solvers to solve real problems if we look to make this school district and community a beacon which we can hope to hold in high esteem.
Thank you, Mr. Slokowicz.
Thank you.
Alen Parm.
Chairman Dowell, esteemed members of the board, and Dr. Herron, my name is Lynn Parm, president of WJCEA. We are here today to urge you to advocate for a better future in WJCC. If our division wants us to keep at least up with inflation, cost of living, and competition to our neighbor divisions, then a 10%, not an 8% raise in salary would at least keep us running. There are still unfilled positions in special education, which puts us at risk of performance assessments and special services for our inclusion and self-contained in all 3 levels. We have 1 middle school in the red, accredited with conditions, 3 in the yellow for English achievement gaps, and 3 high schools in the yellow with mathematics achievement gaps, according to data from VDOE. If we want our teachers to continue to do miracle work in our schools, then we need to be provided with the resources and salary that will help our classroom work environment thrive. Educate our funding partners on what can happen if our funding goal is not met. As a school board member, you are elected to establish the vision and the goals for the public schools in our district, and to advocate for our students, our staff, and our parents as you are entrusted to engineer a better future. So today I leave you with, how do you envision a better future in WJCC? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Parr.
Lonnie Brown. Did I say that right?
Hi everyone, my name is Lonnie Brown and I am a junior at William & Mary. I also work as a community fellow for the village where I contributed research analysis for the equity report. Tonight, I am here to talk about the inequity seen in gifted education programs in WJCC schools. In the strategic plan, WJCC schools called for equitable access for underrepresented student populations to rigorous academic courses, yet we are not seeing this in action. In the data, we see an overrepresentation of white students, making up 77% of students identified as gifted, while only making up 56% of the student population. On the back end, Black students are underrepresented, making up 18.4% of the student population, but only 5.8% of students identified as gifted. So I ask, now aware of these disparities, when will an action plan be made to address them? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown.
I'm going to get this one wrong. Matthew Waneri.
Good evening, board. My name is Matthew Waneri. I'm a senior at William & Mary. I'm representing the Village Initiative. The Black, Hispanic, and mixed race students in WJCC are drastically overrepresented in suspension data. These minority students account for 63% of short-term suspensions, while making up only 42% of the student population. WJCC has one of the worst records in the state by the Virginia Department of Education's own metrics. This isn't a new occurrence either. Since the 2017-2018 school year, minority students have been overrepresented in school discipline data. If WJCC fails to intervene, the minority students will continue to be over-disciplined and receive less in-class instruction. These alarming statistics demand immediate action. WJCC needs to prioritize creating a nurturing environment for its minority students. Some potential solutions include a more inclusive curriculum and hiring more diverse staff. WJCC must also look internally to find the root causes of minority overrepresentation in discipline data to prevent furthering the school-to-prison pipeline in WJCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waneri.
Philip Kennedy.
Good evening. When it comes to the Village Report speaks facts. The data we achieve comes from the VDOE. But before I talk about that, I also want to say I definitely support the 10% raise for all teachers, as a teacher myself. But the Village Report isn't aligned with our strategic plan. So if there's challenges with the Village Report, there should also be challenges with our strategic plan. We have to have markers in place. We've long said WJCC has a good schools. We are a good school system, but we have to have courageous conversations. And those courageous conversations come from the data that's supported from Virginia Department of Education, and we have to look at that in order to make our schools better. We cannot put our head in the sand and pretend like we don't have problems, and when those problems are brought to light, they are attacked. We are here to serve children. That is our number one priority. All children, not any one particular child, all children. And in order to make our school system a great school, we have to be willing to have courageous conversations without attacking one another and listen objectively and be open-minded and not just listening just to respond. Listen for understanding.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Max Blaylock.
Good evening. It's great to be here with y'all. Thank y'all so much for your service. I'm Max Blaylock. I'll take the mask off when I'm up here. I'm Max Blaylock. I'm a parent and a pastor in the community. I have two sons, one at Berkeley and one at Lafayette. And thank y'all so much for the schools that we work to provide for them. I could tell y'all amazing stories. I'll tell you one real quick because I do support the 10% raise for the teachers. There is Ms. Swenson at Lafayette, who is the only ASL teacher in many school districts, is a teacher who has transformed our oldest son's life with American Sign Language. So she is just one example of the excellent teachers that we have here. So thank y'all so much. And I want to remind us that when schools are fully funded and fully staffed and enthusiastically supported by the city, by the county, and by the entire community, everybody wins. You know, my faith, the central teaching of it is love your neighbors yourself. And when our schools, when we work to make them communities of compassion and excellence for all students benefit. So we need to listen and learn, just like we're doing tonight, especially from communities and organizations and data like the Village is bringing us, to say, how can we do better for all students? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Blaylock. Pastor Blaylock.
Jacqueline Williams.
Good evening, Dr. Herron and members of the school board. Thank you for hearing us this evening. First of all, I would like to say, as the founder and executive director of the Village Initiative, that we do support the 10% raise for the teachers and staff of WJCC schools. And I want to say tonight that this is personal to me, and it should be to everyone in this room. There really is only one goal, and that is to ensure that every child in WJCC schools is successful, and that each child has the tools that they need to be successful. What is equity? Equity refers to fairness and justice and distinguished from equality, whereas equality means providing the same to all. Equity means recognizing that we do not all start from the same place and must acknowledge and make adjustments where needed. The Village Initiative is proud of what we are doing. Books to over 500 children every month in our community through our early learning and literacy program. Our local Black Histories project that is partnered with WJCC schools and the College of William and Mary to teach local African American history in our schools very successfully. Our yearly equity report that seems to be on fire tonight. Very successful tutoring programs, sometimes sending out as much as 75 tutors a week. Partnerships throughout the community to meet the needs of children and families of WJCC. These are the tools that will get us there. We encourage you to visit our exhibit that is on display now at the library.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Adrian Carter.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and all the other board members. My name is Adrian Carter. I am from here, Lafayette, 1986, and I support the 10% increase for our local teachers. I'd like to thank the school board for your encouragement and for your support and your alliance with the Village Initiative. And I am here tonight to address the inequity report. And Williamsburg is, as we all know, is not just a wealthy community, it's an affluent community. What's the difference? The difference between wealth and affluence is education. And so all of us know that this report is from the Department of Education, and it represents exactly what's going on here in our county. The elephant in the room that the gentleman missed is the lack of diversity in the classrooms. That starts in elementary school as opposed to here at James Blair in middle school. Again, I'd like to thank you. I'm here tonight to encourage you to have courageous conversation and committed action towards the equity report to support all of our students in James City County. I want to add, in case I have a couple of seconds, that my daughter started here in public school in 2nd grade. She was in the gifted program. By the time she got to 4th grade, she had dummied down and did not qualify for gifted program any longer.
Thank you, Ms. Carter.
Anne Marie Smith.
Hi, good evening. Mrs. Thompson was my 4th grade teacher at the public Pearsontown Elementary School. She was firm, strict, demanding, kind, and mothering. She was a very good teacher. She was also African American. Note that's not the first thing that I recall about her, nor was it the first thing that she led with when teaching our class. I learned more from that class than any other in elementary school. Race was not the focus of my class then, and nor should it be now. It's preposterous to me, and likely to her, to presume that I could not learn from her, nor be able for her to teach me, because of the pigment of our skin differed. Well, let's talk about Mrs. Chambers. We called her Chames. She was my coach for volleyball, basketball, softball, as well as my PE and health class teacher during my entire junior high school. She was a source of knowledge and wisdom, of energy, light, and an otherwise mundane set of years. Did I notice her skin or hair was unlike mine? Yeah, of course I did. But never was it an issue or a barrier to her coaching, teaching, nor a barrier to myself or my teammates learning. I will never consider myself underserved by her commitment and instruction. I will not allow anyone to assign a data set or label to her value or mine because of our difference in color. Persons or organizations who promote or propagate otherwise are sadly misguided. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Phyllis Eastman.
Good evening. I would like to have you all revote on the 1.5 minute for people. It's not fair to you or us that we have to speak in that quickly as response. I'm speaking to the Village Initiative. Sometimes reports and data, they start with a premise and then they use the data that they find to support their premise when their premise isn't even right. But we know that that can be done and is done all the time. Looking at the report, you almost want to say it suggests that Black teachers benefit Black students and white students, but white teachers only benefit white students. I find that hard to believe, having taught in a predominantly minority school. During the days of segregation, there were Black schools and Black teachers. When integration occurred, Black students, did their reading and writing go down, or did their reading and writing go up? As far as Black teachers and discipline, according to the Village Initiative, Black teachers don't have as many discipline problems. I don't know how many they counted in this data. However, does any of that come from what students are taught at home about race? That has to be, I'd like some statistics on that. And if Black teachers are better at disciplining, let's video them and have an in-service where we can see that in action.
Thank you, Ms. Eastman.
Thank you.
Charles Stevenson.
And who is the next?
Damon Walker is after that.
Good evening. Charlie Stevenson, Williamsburg resident. I will keep this very short. I'm kind of a schematic guy. I had a couple questions in regards to the village initiative. I want to know the difference between equity and racial discrimination. Wish we could have that definition. And students are victims of discrimination, and equality and fairness are not always the same. I was never tapped for a Major League Baseball team. They never called. They never did. Some people aren't. Some of us are right-handed, some of us are left-handed. It doesn't really matter. So I would like you to have the attorney for the school board give us how this equity report doesn't violate the 1964 Civil Rights Act, because I think it does. Although they've stumbled on some good things with tutoring and books, depending on the books. So if you could have the attorney do that, and I guess that's enough. I beat the clock?
You did, sir. Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Stevenson.
Damon Walker.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Damon Walker, 21-year Army veteran. Our First Amendment rights to learn, read, and discuss vital topics are under attack. CRT, which is an academic and legal framework that is taught at the college level, has been used as a catch-all term to apply broadly across K through 12 classroom discussions about race and racism. The Village Initiative recently released their 5th annual equity report. The report provides evidence-based analysis and recommendations for concerning trends in our district, none of which are new. The goal of the village is to hold the superintendent, the school board accountable for making a path for better education for all students, something I hope all parents would expect. Our goal, a group of community members may have concluded that data is, despite being research-based, flawed simply because it doesn't fit their narrative. A group of community members have decided that their goal is to remove equity training from our schools. Their words, not mine. This group of community members would rather ignore research-based data instead of addressing it. What they're saying to me, a parent who happens to be black, and that I don't matter. That my son, who's also a student within this district, doesn't matter. That all black and brown students within our district does not matter. I am calling on the superintendent, the school board, the community members behind me, and those watching online to support diversity, equity, and inclusion in our schools. Our collective future depends on it.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Marco Sardi, followed by Cynthia Baker.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. My name is Marco Sardi, and I'm the Vice President of WJCEA, and I'm here to advocate for all WJCC employees in regards to the budget proposal for next year. I encourage you to support the 10% pay raise that we are asking for, but also to keep in mind that you cannot get or receive what you do not first ask for. Currently in the budget, we have allocated for a 7 to 8% raise, and this is encouraging as it is more in line than what we started with. I encourage you to remember the 7% increase in SOQ staff funding for next year as allocated by the state, which is an increase from the last time we had this discussion. This may allocate the extra funding we need to ask for from our funding partners to meet these goals. This is according to almost 4 out of 5 staff. The salary is the top priority for our membership and for all WJCC staff as provided by your own survey. I would like to also speak about some of the comments you've heard about equity practices in our division. These practices encourage the construction and maintenance of a mindful work environment focused on the practices of treating others with equity. This does not mean everyone is treated the same. To use an apt analogy, all students, regardless of right-handedness or left-handedness, need a pair of scissors. Equity is recognizing that students who are left-handed, though a smaller percentage, require those resources. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sardi.
Cynthia Baker. Followed by Jennifer Bickham-Mendez.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Baker, and I live in the city, and Dr. Dell and the board. My comments are also for the village report, but before I go there, I want to say I fully support a increase in salaries for the teachers, the 10%. I was disturbed by the report. I felt like there were a lot of holes in it. What I really first noticed was there seemed to be a very high incidence or percentage of students of color, as well as the lower percentage of teachers of color. What does that mean, of color? I looked for the criteria of what that means. You would think it would be apparent. I know you're of color, but did this include Hispanics? Did it include Asians? Who did it include? Mixed races? And maybe that's where those numbers came from. I don't know. I looked in the resources. I couldn't find it. And the other thing that was missing to me was that it talked about the ability of the students who were taught by blacks or students of color that were taught by teachers of color, whatever that means. Does that mean it's an Asian teacher? Does that teaching a black student? Does that mean it's a mixed race teacher teaching an Asian student? What does that mean? But they did talk about the 3% and the 13% increase in performance. But what was the effect on white children who were taught by?
Thank you, Ms. Baker.
Yeah, so that's missing. Thank you.
Jennifer Bickham-Mendez.
Good evening, Dr. Heron and members of the school board. My name is Jennifer Bickham-Mendez. I live here in James City County. I want to start by saying I fully support the 10% raise for teachers. Both my children went K through 12 at WJCC, and their lives were changed by teachers, and they deserve our full support of a 10% raise. I'm also a proud member of the village and the chair of the sociology department at William & Mary. And I wanted to call your attention today to a particular statistic in the annual equity report that I wanted to be sure to highlight. What stood out to me is the English learners' SOL pass rates. And I really wanted to call your attention to the fact that they're lower in every area than the state average. This is a real concern, and it's not acceptable in a division like ours for them to be from 4 to nearly 10% percentage points lower than their peers. And I would like to call on the board and the superintendent to please ask the question, why are some of our most vulnerable students in our school system not receiving the support that they need to succeed, at least on par with their peers? This is an indictment of the teachers. I've worked side by side with the ESL teachers in the school division in this very school, and I know that their quality of their work is exceptional. I just want to say that, the parents of those students probably aren't here tonight. They don't feel like that they can make their voice heard. We need to make them a priority, and I urge you to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mendez.
That's it.
Thank you, Ms. Orgo, and thank you for everyone who did come out to lend your voice to these different topics. I appreciate you spending the time with us this evening, and invite you to stay as well as we continue our work as a school board. We're going to move on to our consent agenda, and let me ask for a motion to approve this consent agenda as I present it. Item 7.1, approval of financial report and monthly bills and payroll for January 2023. Item 7.2, approval of minutes from January 17th, 2023, our budget work session. Approval of, item 7.3, approval of minutes from January 17th, 2023's meeting. Item 7.4, approval of minutes from February 7th, 2023, that meeting. Item 7.5, resolution R523, National School Social Work Week. Item 7.6, resolution R623, National Foreign Language Week. Item 7.7, resolution R723, Disability Awareness Month. And, item 7.8, resolution R8-23, Equity in Education Month. Item 7.9, approval of revisions to policy GBMA, staff complaints and grievances. Item 7.10, approval of revisions to policy GDMA, educational support staff employee grievance procedures. Item 711, approval of retirement of IGCA summer school. Item 712, approval of revisions to IGBE remedial instruction program. And then finally, item 713, approval of revisions to policy IKE acceleration or retention of students. Is there a member that would offer a motion to approve the consent agenda as read?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Any discussion? Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Dr. Beers, are you with us? I can see you. You're muted. I see your lips moving. Is that moving? Is that an aye, Dr. Beers, for the consent agenda? You're muted. Okay. I don't have a vote from Dr. Beers. I cannot understand what you're saying, and I don't think we can remotely unmute him. Is that possible?
Yes.
Okay. And can we proceed, Ms. Aller?
Yes, sir. Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Okay, and I believe that is 6 ayes to 1 no vote, or abstention. We'll call it an abstention. Okay. Not a no vote, an abstention. Okay, so our consent agenda is approved. We're going to move on to item 8.1, approval of personnel actions. Is there a motion for this? Stand by for a second. Dr. Beers, are you with us now? Can you hear me?
Sorry. Yeah, I can.
Okay, thank you. We're moving on to item 8.1, Dr. Beers, approval of personnel actions. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the personnel actions as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Thank you, Ms. Donner. Ms. Aller.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Thank you. Just looking at that motion. Okay. Item 8.2, approval of award of contract for invitation for bid number 2023075, our War Hill High School interior renovations. Is there a motion for this item?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the award of contract for invitation for bid number 2023075, War Hill High School interior renovations.
Is there a second?
Oh, do I have to?
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Beers.
I have to say the amount.
I'm not seeing the amount. Do you see it?
It's below.
I was looking
It's
for the
not.
same. Okay, I see it there. Thank you.
Sorry.
Dr. Beers, we're going to ask for the second in a second. I couldn't see that.
Sorry,
either.
I
Go
move
ahead.
to approve the award of contract for the invitation for bid number 2023075, War Hill High School interior renovations to Centennial Contractors in the amount of $1,429,000.
Thank you. I was missing the same thing. Is there a second, Dr. Beers? Thank you, Dr. Beers. We have a motion. Is there any discussion on this approval for bid to Centennial Contractors in the amount of $1.429 million for renovation at War Hill High Schools? Okay. I believe that this was already part of our CIP plan. Is that right, Dr. Herron?
That's correct, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. All right, without any other delay, Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hunley.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. All right, item 8.3, motion to approve the purchase request of laptops for staff and student use. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve purchase request of laptops for staff and student use to Lenovo in the amount of $1,177,326.00.
Thank you, Ms. Young. And no cents. All right. No, thank you, Ms. Young. Is there a second?
Second.
Sorry.
I think that was Ms. Hundley. Thank you, Ms. Hundley. I was distracted over here.
Sorry.
All right. Any conversation, any discussion on this item? All right, hearing none. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hundley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
Aye. So you are not getting a penny more, Dr. Aaron.
0 cents.
0 cents. Okay, sorry. I'm over it. Item 8.4, approval of budget transfer request. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the budget transfer request from the instruction to student attendance and health in the amount of $200,000.
Thank you, Ms. Donner. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Young. So this comes to the board because per our policy, any requisitions or transfers over $100,000 must come to the board for approval. Any other questions or comments or anything we need to address before we move forward with this one? Okay. Ms. Aller?
Mrs. Donner.
Aye.
Ms. Hummel.
Aye.
Mrs. Hundley.
Aye.
Mrs. Ortega.
Aye.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Was that me?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, yes. Aye.
And Mr. Dowell.
Aye. Thank you all. And we're going to move on to 9.1. We've got a presentation of the superintendent's proposed operating budget for fiscal year 24. Dr. Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and school board members. This evening, we are delighted to present the superintendent's proposed budget, which supports 11,300 students, 395 pre-K students, 16 schools, and over 1,900 employees. Our schools are an integral part of the city of Williamsburg and James City County, and we are fortunate to have the strong support of our community. The city of Williamsburg and James City County, our funding partners, have consistently invested in our schools, our teachers, and our students. Collectively, they fund just over 60% of our operating budget. WJCC Schools receives over 29% of its funding from the state, plus almost 10% in state sales tax. Federal funding provides less than 0.5% of the WJCC Schools' annual operating revenue. The fiscal year 24 proposed budget is aligned with the goals of the strategic plan, Elevate Beyond Excellence. Our priorities include teaching and learning, meeting the needs of all students, safety and security, and employee compensation. In support of Goal 1, focused on academic achievement, this budget includes transitioning 9 math interventionists to support instruction from the American Rescue Plan grant, and adding 10 teachers into the operating budget to maintain teacher-to-student ratios. In support of Goals 2 and 4, it includes 3 counselor positions to sustain the 250 students to 1 counselor ratio recommended by the American School Counselor Association, a school psychologist, additional special education teachers, a student support coordinator, and a supervisor of safe schools. These positions will enable us to maintain our current level of service and continue to be proactive in addressing mental health, school environment, and school safety. Our greatest resource at WJCC Schools is our people. Retaining our excellent, dedicated employees and attracting new employees is again a primary focus of this year's budget. Teachers, administrators, support employees all contribute to the positive learning that makes it possible for every student to learn. Therefore, in alignment with Strategic Goal 5, the largest proposed increase in this budget of $8.7 million is for salaries. If we are to attract and retain the best employees in a highly competitive market and have classrooms and other positions fully staffed the first day of school, we must compensate our employees fairly. Quality teachers are in incredibly short supply, as are bus drivers, custodial staff, and other support staff. As of today, we have 73 vacant positions across our organization. 14 instructional positions, 8 of those are teachers, 11 teacher assistants, 24 food nutrition services personnel, 8 positions in transportation, 7 of those are bus drivers, Several specialized services positions such as occupational therapists and nurses and other support positions posted and currently unfilled. We simply must invest in retaining and attracting new talent to WJCC schools. This budget also sustains our investment in quality health insurance. Currently, 27% of the operating budget is allocated to employee benefits, and $19 million of that directly supports health insurance. For each full-time employee who elects family coverage, WJCC Schools contributes over $20,000 per year. Of note, health insurance rates have risen 9.9% over last year. Our employees select insurance based on their family's needs, and 33% do not elect health insurance through WJCC Schools. A salary increase, however, impacts 100% of our staff and has residual benefits on retirement for years to come. This budget proposal is informed by data presented in budget sessions in January. For example, staff presented comparative data on teacher compensation, staffing ratios, and health insurance. Mr. Chair and members of the board, this is a budget of need. With full funding, we will be able to meet the essential needs of our students and appropriately compensate our incredibly talented employees. Ms. Ewing, our Chief Financial Officer, will now join me in presenting the Superintendent's proposed budget this evening. If possible, I would like to ask you to hold your questions until the end of the presentation so we may lay out the plan in its entirety. Ms. Ewing.
Before we pass it over to Ms. Ewing, I think Ms. Hundley has a statement.
I think I don't have to read it since we're not voting tonight. I'm not sure.
We're taking in information. I think you should.
Okay, but I don't have it in front of me.
It should be, it is under executive content, under 9.1. 9.1 executive content.
Thank you. As a member of the School Board of Williamsburg, James City County, I acknowledge that I may have an interest in the fiscal year 23 school budget because my husband is an employee of the WJCC schools. However, I believe that I am able to participate in the consideration of the vote on the budget fairly, objectively, and in the public interest.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Appreciate it. Thank you, Ms. Ewing.
Thank you, Mr. Dow. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Herron. It is my pleasure to present to you this evening the superintendent's proposed fiscal year 24 operating budget. As you know, considerable work has gone into developing the superintendent's proposed budget. This fiscal year 24 plan is a balance of meeting established school board priorities related to the strategic plan, Elevate Beyond Excellence, a review of available revenue, and meeting the division needs for the upcoming fiscal year. Throughout the budget process, school administration made decisions based on one overarching question: what is best for all students and staff? Enrollment is based on our September 30th student count each year. This is a historical look at our enrollment from fiscal year 2015 until now. We had a steady increase in enrollment through fiscal year 2018. Then enrollment leveled off for a couple of years at approximately 11,450 prior to the COVID-19 pandemic. We saw a decline in enrollment in fiscal year 21 to 10,858 due to the pandemic, but we've increased for the past 2 years and are now back up to 11,308. Each year, FutureThink prepares a 10-year enrollment projection based on our September 30th enrollment information. These projections include a low, moderate, most likely, and high projection. Next year's projection ranges from a low of 11,224 to a high of 11,537. For many years, we have used the low projection to develop our operating budget, but we have developed this budget again based on our current year enrollment as of September 30th. Enrollment is slowly recovering after the decline due to the pandemic, and we believe the most conservative approach is to budget based on the students that we currently have. And as a reminder, these enrollment numbers do not include our pre-K students, which total 395 each year. In addition to enrollment data, we use the strategic plan to guide the development of the budget and to ensure the budget supports the needs and goals of the school division, taking into consideration the input of our stakeholders. As I go through the presentation and review expenditure increases, those that are considered mandatory, which is a statutory or contractually obligated expenditure, are notated with an asterisk. All other expenditures are deemed essential in order to continue to deliver high-quality construction and to sustain division operations. Currently, our state revenue is based on Governor Youngkin's proposed amendments to the 2022-2024 biennial budget and is estimated to go up by approximately $5 million. And as a reminder, this is not our final state budget, and these estimates could change based on General Assembly action. Here you will see the proposed expenditures related to Goal 1, academic achievement, college and career readiness of the strategic plan, as shared at our earlier budget work sessions, which includes our commitment to the New Horizons program, as well as an increase in school-based allocations based on enrollment of 11,308 students. I would like to note that the amount for New Horizons is less than the amount we were originally projecting of $310,000. There are also positions related to Goal 1, which includes 10 classroom teachers, 9 elementary math interventionists, and a CTE coordinator. The math interventionist and CTE coordinator are being transitioned from our American Rescue Plan grant into the operating budget. Goal 2 of the strategic plan focuses on educational equity. Expenditure increases here are for personnel to support the division's special education populations, as well as transitioning the coordinator for student services into the operating fund, which leads the division's implementation of multi-tier systems of support, or MTSS, across all of our schools. The safety and security of students and staff remains a priority as seen in Goal 4. Expenditure increases here amount to approximately $441,000. The budget proposal includes 3 school counselors in order to maintain our staffing ratio of 250 to 1, which is the recommended staffing ratio of the National Association of School Counseling. One of these positions is being transitioned from our American Rescue Plan grant. There's a school psychologist position being transitioned from our American Rescue Plan grant, and a new supervisor of safety and emergency management as recommended in our threat vulnerability assessment report received in the spring of 2022. In order to attract and retain high-quality employees and remain competitive with neighboring divisions, the budget proposal includes an average 8% salary increase for eligible employees. Of this increase, 5% is considered mandatory in order to receive our full revenue allocation from the state, and the additional 3% is essential in order to remain competitive in today's job market. Funds are included within the budget proposal to support a one-time 1% retention bonus to employees as provided for in the governor's proposal. It is also recommended that stipends be adjusted by an average 2.5% in order to attract staff to take on these additional duties. There are also funds allocated for internal equity adjustments to be considered. Additional items under Goal 5 includes funds to continue with the higher substitute teacher and nurse pay rates, as well as funds for minimum pay considerations as we increase our minimum pay from $12 an hour to $13.50 an hour. Our health insurance increase came in at 9.9%, which is proposed to be split 70% WJCC and 30% employees. Overall, the investment under Goal 5, Human Capital and Positive Culture, amounts to $11.5 million, which is essential to attract new staff as well as to retain the dedicated staff that we already have here in WJCC. Moving on to budgetary expenditures related to Goal 6, organizational efficiency and effectiveness, you will see funding to support anticipated increases in our workers' compensation and general liability insurances, as well as cost increases for our audit and risk management contracts. Specific increases related to operations and transportation under Goal 6 include anticipated increases in our grounds maintenance and storage facility contracts, as well as utilities and fuel and the transportation contract for alternative transportation services. Also related to Goal 6, organizational efficiency, we have estimated savings of just under $1.5 million as represented on this slide. This graphic outlines that our focus is right where it should be, instruction. It represents our expenditures by functional area, and instruction makes up 74% of our total budget. And as you can see by this graph, 88% of our operating expenditures are spent on people, salaries and benefits for our dedicated staff. When you compare the estimated increase in revenue of approximately $5.1 million to our expenditure adjustments, which amount to approximately $13.5 million, the difference is $8.4 million, which becomes our request to our funding partners. This amount represents an 8.7% increase above our current fiscal year 23 appropriations from the localities. So, where do we get the money in our operating fund? This graphic shows the breakdown of revenue received by funding source. In WJCC schools, the majority of our funding, approximately 61%, is reliant on the support of the City of Williamsburg and James City County. Here you will see all funds for our current budget as well as the fiscal year 24 budget proposal. The total of all funds, including operating, grants, state-operated programs, and child nutrition services funds, amounts to a total of $194,087,900. Overall, there is a $13.5 million increase year to year for the operating fund, of which $5.1 million is supported by increased state and other revenue, and the remaining $8.4 million will become a request for additional funding from the localities. Our next steps in the budget development and approval process include a public hearing on Dr. Heron's budget proposal on March 7th. A joint meeting with our funding partners from the city and county is scheduled for March 17th, with board discussion and approval of the budget on March 21st. In order to deliver this to the city and county by April 1st, the school board approved budget. And that concludes our formal presentation of the superintendent's budget. We'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Let me look to, goodness gracious. Let me look to those joining us virtually. Ms. Hummel or Dr. Beers. I'm seeing Dr. Beers say he doesn't have anything. Ms. Hummel, no? Good, okay. Anybody here have any questions or comments related to the presentation we received? Yeah, thank you.
Right.
Ms. Young.
Thank you for doing this, Mrs. Ewing. I would like to go back to the expenditure increases. I just have a question about that. Is that the amount of money that was put in the budget, is that in addition to other monies that are in the budget?
Yes, so that's a comparison to our current year budget. So we're increasing our expenditures by $13.5 million.
Okay, so but how much are we paying right now?
Our current year budget is $160,298,500.
No, I'm talking about just the increase, the expenditure increase. I mean, maybe if you could go back, can we go back to the slide and then I can make my question more specific?
Which
is it slide 20?
This slide?
No, that's not the one.
So the increase from last year to this year is approximately 13.5 million, and over 8 million of that is in salaries alone.
Okay. I don't think that's not the slide, but okay, I mean, I understand that. There was a slide that had a whole bunch of percentages and everything else, but okay. Let me see if I can find it.
You mean like the pie charts?
No.
No?
If you, can you just keep clicking back another, like, no? No? That one,
This one?
yes. Because, for example, it says grounds maintenance and storage. And then it says in fiscal year 23, it was 2K, 332,000. And then in fiscal year 351. So there, what you're saying is there's an increase of $18,000 between those 2 years.
Yes.
That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I got it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Young. While we wait for any other comments or questions, I do have a few. So, Dr. Herron, I appreciate the introduction that you provided to your proposed budget here. Can you explain, remind the board and explain to our listening members of the community how we arrived at this figure, 8.4 million, and a shortfall? What we began, I believe, was thinking it would be 16, and in fact, it was 17 because of a calc tool error from the state, but it was essentially a $17 million shortfall. How did we arrive to 8.4 today?
Ms. Ewing may have that list in front of her here. We actually started off at a 16 million ask from our funding partners, and we basically started to look at every piece of the budget, and we were originally, you got that in front of you, Ms. Ewing? We could just go down the list and just reiterate it again if we have it.
I do have the list. We've reduced our teacher allocations. Originally, we were looking at adding 15 teachers, and we've reduced that to a total of 10.
And the 15 was based on a calculation per class size, so we keep our current class size with 300 more students that we got last year. But then we literally looked at every single classroom to see could we reduce that ask from 15 to 10. Originally, the ask or the numbers in the table were between 5 and 10% salary. And after much discussion with the board, we're proposing an 8% salary increase and not the 10, which again is 3% above what's currently in the governor's budget. There's some other examples. Do you want us to go through the list, Mr. Douglas?
No, thank you. That's good. And then so, as you're talking about salaries, I think I recall that, well, we know that our staff, our teachers are advocating for a 10% increase. We've heard that loud and clear. If we could make that happen, I think that the board would love to see that happen. But we also have to recognize the impact of that level of an ask on the heels of, it looks like, what would have been 17 million, looking at 8.4 million. Really doing our due diligence and working in partnership with our funding partners to do what we can for our faculty and staff so that retention of staff is our preeminent focus. When I first came on the board, a 1% increase was essentially $1 million. That's not the case today, is that right?
Right, it's about 1.1 million for the operating fund.
Because I had jotted 1.3, so 1.1.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So we see essentially a savings of about $2.2 million, looking at a wage increase of 8 versus 10. Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then the health insurance, I know you worked very diligently to reduce the amount of premium passed on to the division and, of course, to the employee. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. Originally, our health insurance increase was 15%. Then we were told it was going to be a maximum of 14%. And then we spent significant time with our insurers, and the final number that they came back was 9.9% increase. We also, taking the survey that we did with staff, originally in that $16 million, the division was paying 100% of the increase. And when we surveyed staff as to what they prioritize, salary, health insurance, or adding staff, we changed the 100% that we would pay to 70% paid by the employer and 30% paid by the employee. That's of the increase in insurance.
So last year we faced an increase of, I think, 5% is what I recall.
That's
in
correct.
healthcare insurance. So
Yes,
in premium. to go from 5 last year to 15, knocked down to 14, knocked it down to 9.9. But what was the impetus behind the increase of 15? How did they rationalize that?
It's a pretty calculated piece. I think they look at the number of claims. They look at, I think there's the thought that over the pandemic, a lot of people didn't go to the doctor. Then they started catching up on doctor's appointments, and that may have led to more claims as well. But they look at the average across the whole organization to determine the percentage for the next year.
Are there any other members that have questions or comments? Ms. Ortega?
So is it fair to say that the adjustments that you've already made to the initial budget were in order to get us to the 8% that we're at now?
Yeah, I think we've looked at the overall very large ask of our localities. If we'd stayed at 10%, if we'd taken the whole health insurance, if we'd kept all of the positions that we could have asked to have every the 300 students, we could have asked for so many more positions there. We looked at every single piece to try to reduce our final ask of our community. There's a lot still out in the General Assembly, and both the House and the Senate. They're proposing a 7% raise, which we only knew after we talked through our budget preparation. And that may impact our budget as well. So it's very challenging to present a budget before we have the final numbers.
As it is every year, yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. I think I'm looking forward to hearing from the public in our next meeting as they have yet another final opportunity to weigh in on this proposed budget by our superintendent, a public hearing on March 7th. I think I'd like to pour over your proposed budget between that time frame. So thank you for the presentation, Ms. Ewing, and thank you. Do you have more?
I have a
Look
few
like you
more
have more.
slides to share information
That's all I saw.
regarding the
Okay,
House
I'm sorry.
and
Go
Senate
ahead.
budgets.
I apologize.
So even though the state budget isn't yet finalized, we wanted to share with you this evening information related to the state budget and what impact the House and Senate versions would have on our revenue for next year. So on this slide, you will see our current proposed fiscal year 24 state revenue, which is based on Governor Youngkin's proposed amendments to the 2022-2024 biennial budget and a comparison to the House version of the state budget. Under the House version, we would receive only $550,000 more in state funding. The House version includes funding for a 7% salary increase and additional funding for reading specialists as compared to the governor's budget. The House version does not include funding for the one-time 1% retention bonus payment as included in the governor's budget. And on this slide, you'll see our current proposed fiscal year 24 state revenue compared to the Senate version of the state budget. The Senate budget is much more favorable to public education, as we would receive approximately $4.4 million more in state funding. The Senate budget also includes a 7% salary increase, as well as elimination of the cap on state funding for support staff, state funding for additional mental and physical health staff, and additional funds for English learner instructors. Based on current information, this would be the best case scenario for our state revenue for next year. But under both of these scenarios, we would need to revisit our expenditure budget, as the exclusion of the bonus in the House version would reduce our overall expenditure budget, but the bonus version under the Senate is actually a $1,000 bonus as opposed to a 1%, which would increase our overall expenditure budget.
I apologize, Ms. Ewing. I usually see what's next as the last slide, so I apologize getting ahead of you.
That's okay.
I think this information is incredibly important because the budgets are so far apart this year, and the Senate version really does something that has been in place since 2009 and lifts the support cap and gives us funding for many positions that we already have. And so if this prevails, or even part of it prevails, it will bring more money to the school division. And my budget is now presented So I don't have a chance to do anything with that information because it's not final.
We ask you this every time. Any inclination as to when we might hear something from the state? No. Right, yeah.
I think it's so far
This
apart, I'm
wishful
not
thinking.
sure.
No
Wishful
crystal ball.
Okay. Well, thank you again for the presentation. Ms. Donner?
So if wherever between the Senate and where the House of Delegates lands, if there were, let's say, it was $2 million extra, does that then help us get to the 10% raise that the teachers are asking for? And does that have to help? Would that help offset that, or do you have any idea of what that does to our budget numbers?
That would depend on the direction of the board, if you'd like to commit that additional revenue from the state to increasing the salary increase, or if you'd like to look at reducing our request from our funding partners.
Thank you.
Even half the money in the Senate budget, 2.2, would allow us to change our percentage raise by 2%.
I think by that time we'll have had conversations with our partners at the county and city, and we'll have a better indication of where we are collaboratively. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Ewing. Appreciate it. Thank you for your work and your staff. We're going to move on to item 9.2, school start tier times, the planning update. Dr. Herron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This evening, Mr. Keever is going to give us a brief update on our discussion of changing bus tiers for next year, and in particular, going to present some of the barriers to success if we are to make this decision tonight moving forward. Mr. Keever.
Thank you, Dr. Herron. Good evening, members of the board. This presentation is really designed as a follow-up to the conversation during the first board meeting in February to try to provide some additional information and context with respect to school tier and start times. One of the pieces we wanted to be sure that was clear to the board and the public would be that our anticipated tier time and structure would include a 7:40 a.m. start for the elementary school in tier 1. We would then go to elementary school tier 2. We would place high school in the third grouping, and then middle schools would tentatively start at 9:45 with a 4:25 departure. These times aren't new to you. We've shared those before, but I think sometimes in the midst of conversations about different iterations that might get lost on folks. But this would be our recommended tier time structure should we move forward. To Dr. Herron's point, however, as we continue to look at the possibilities for making this kind of seismic shift in the division, a number of barriers became clearer and clearer to us. We believe that the tier times that I've just presented are less than ideal. And when I say less than ideal, I mean that the starting time at the elementary level is probably a little bit too early, and the ending time at middle school with a tier 4 departure is probably a little bit too late. That's really related to the number of drivers that we have on staff. So one of those barriers is the staffing shortages with respect to drivers. We remain concerned about childcare, and there is a sense of uncertainty with the direction of RecConnect. We do know that the county is looking at the service model provided, and to our knowledge, a decision on that has not yet been reached. Finally, another barrier was the data that we presented during the February 7th meeting with respect to community input. There wasn't a clear community direction that emerged during that data conversation. One additional piece that we wanted to share with you data-wise was the potential of staffing challenges and changes with a shift. When we queried staff during the community survey opportunity, 76% indicated that they would remain regardless of the time structure, but somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 or 25% indicated that they may look for a transfer within the division or actually consider moving out of the division, depending upon what the tiering structure might look like. As we move forward for this year and into next year, we look to continue to increase efficiencies with our transportation system. We talked with you last year a little bit about the home to stop distance. That was increased a small amount. We are going to continue to look at whether or not we can increase that home to stop distance, which would create additional efficiencies. We are going to look specifically at expanding the non-transportation zones to elementary schools, and in areas where that makes sense, we'll be bringing that plan forward in the spring for implementation in the fall of '23. We continue to focus on hiring additional bus drivers. We hope in that effort to reduce our need for external transportation, and we'll continue to monitor the improvements that come with that and communicate that information to our families. So in summation, we are not bringing forward administratively a recommendation to move forward with the change in tiers. We are prioritizing student achievement and sustaining a positive climate for the remainder of the 22-23 school year, and want to leave the option on the table to potentially revisit in 23-24 should the conditions change or improve. With that, I'm happy to address any additional questions that may be on the minds of board members.
Thank you, Mr. Kiefer. I want to open up to the board for comments or questions. You're going to leave it to me? Okay. Well, I just want to say thank you for the update, Dr. Herron, Mr. Kiefer. My takeaway from our last meeting was that the biggest challenge was a challenge of timeline, not necessarily all the other obstacles that you had laid out this evening. So I appreciate the update and the clarification, because we were ready as a board, and certainly I was, to give you, the division, Dr. Herron, you and your leadership team, the support that I thought you were looking for to move forward with this endeavor in a subsequent year. So I appreciate the update. This is a clear recommendation that nothing be done yet.
That's
Dr.
correct.
Herron?
That's
Yeah.
correct, sir. And we may come back and ask for that resolution at a later date. Once we allow some of the things to unfold, that could be barriers to success next year. Don't believe I'm ready to make that recommendation at this point in time, because if we do it, I want to do it well, and I want to offer a tier structure to families that we can actually, that would work for families, both elementary and especially middle school in the later part of the day. So it's not off the table completely. I'd like to leave the option open to come back. We're going to reach out to TransFinder to do some other data analysis for us on transportation and see if we can come up with a better structure.
Your team's done an incredible amount of work to get us to this point, understanding the priorities and the likings of the community several times over, I believe. And this, as we talked about last meeting and several meetings prior to that, this is genuinely an administrative decision, one that we just want to be able to support once you come to that crossroads. So we'll be ready to do that when the time comes. I believe we will.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Dr. Beers.
I'd like to make a motion to have this put on as an action item at our next school board meeting in terms of the recommendation.
Okay, we do. We have a motion from Dr. Beers that we include this as an action item at our next meeting, take it as a vote, and specifically, what would we be voting on, Dr. Beers?
Sorry.
What would we be voting on? What would be the action to take?
To whether we agree or disagree with the recommendation.
Okay, and so Dr. Beers, we'll have discussion on that in a moment. Is there a second to support this motion?
Second.
Okay. We've got a second supporting the motion that in our next meeting, we add an action item that we take up a vote to uphold this recommendation from Dr. Herron. And the recommendation is that we take no action to change the school tier start times in school year 23-24. Discussion. So as I've stated, and I hear where you're coming from, Dr. Beers and Ms. Young, this is an administrative decision, and I think that I would say that it confused the point when several times it was noted that we are recommending. And even tonight, I think we are recommending that we do nothing. I think does a disservice to this being an administrative decision. To me, it's not a recommendation, it's a thank you for allowing us to explore. What we have decided is we are not going to. But I appreciate you. This is, just a second, Dr. Beers. I'm going to come to you, Dr. Beers. I'm going to come to you. I'm going to come to you 1 second. I just lost my thought. Go ahead, Dr. Beers. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think members of the board still have a responsibility to decide if they agree or disagree with the recommendation. It doesn't mean that it's binding, but I would like to know in an action item like this how the board feels about this. There's been a tremendous amount of discussion about this.
Okay.
And every board member, every board up until this board, for the last, I don't know, 10, 15 years, has always found a reason why they could not move forward with this. And my feeling is you do what you have to do in order to get this done. And I really believe that the superintendent and staff need to know how the board feels about that.
So, Dr. Beers, may I ask a question?
Do anything.
May I ask a question? So you want to take a vote to hear the board's leanings on whether we agree with the recommendation or not. I would say that we did that last meeting by unanimously supporting a resolution, but then to take your point further, if the vote is in support or, against the recommendation, would you then suppose that we force Dr. Herron's hand and begin the tier? No, I'm asking. What's the next step?
I did not say
What's the next step?
that we were forcing anybody's hand.
I'm asking you what the next step is.
Saw this as an opportunity for the board in its official capacity to decide if they agree with this or not. What is wrong with that?
There's nothing wrong with it. I think we did that last meeting. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
It was presented this way last week, the last time. We did not see all these explanations.
Okay.
Furthermore, if these were so important, why are we waiting until now? If these were such critical issues, we never should have gone forward with this. Because it's been worked on for what, 2, 3, 4, 5 months? And the information that has been presented tonight hasn't changed tremendously since we started talking about it. That's all.
Okay.
I have nothing,
Want to open it up to the rest of the board before I ask Ms.
The board can vote down my action item.
Okay.
I don't care. I'm done with this.
I'm waiting one moment before I. You have something to say, Ms. Young?
I do, actually.
Sure.
And thank you, Mr. Keever, for the presentation tonight. I felt like at the end of the meeting on February 7th, I felt very unsettled. I think that would probably be the best description of how I felt when it came to this discussion, because this is not the first time, and I stated that on February 7th, that this is not the first time that this topic and issue has come before the board, and Dr. Beers knows that it's come before the board other times during his residency here. My only concern is that when something is brought before the board, and maybe there was the possibility that not all of the facts were available at the time it was presented when we started discussing the tiers. But my feeling is that to me, this is a hot topic for me, because I do think that high school students shouldn't go to school so early. On the other hand, I don't really want elementary students out on the street at 6:30. But I understand the reasoning that was presented tonight. However, I would like in the future, if topics like this are brought before the board, that that maybe we have all the facts. And I do understand that things come to the front of a discussion that do change the argument of the discussion. But, I mean, this is the second time since I've been on the school board, and I personally would like it moved forward because it's something I feel strongly about for our high school students. But I understand what you're saying, and I do feel like what Mr. Dow said, that at the end of the last meeting, the idea of having a resolution, that we would support that, recognizing that it is an administrative decision. I was very happy about that the idea of a resolution came forward. Mr. Dow is very good at coming up with solutions to things that that support the role of the board and discussions. But I just don't want to waste my time on anything else that we're going to start backing down from. That's basically what I'm trying to say, because we've spent a lot of time talking about it, and again with no resolution, and that concerns me as a board member. So thank you, Mr. Dowell.
Yes, the question was, there's a motion and it was seconded. Are we going to, yes, we are going to take a roll call vote in a moment. And Ms. Aller, I'm going to ask Ms. Aller to read for us the motion before you take the roll. I think you're on it, right?
Microphone.
Okay. Is there any other comments before we move to Ms. Aller?
Yes.
Ms. Hummel? Looks like she's ready. Ms. Hummel?
Is this an action? I just have a question. Is this an action item that, because we're having the discussion right now, correct?
We are having a discussion on Dr. Beers' motion that he presented this evening.
So we can have this discussion without having to rephrase what he's talking about doing, the action item? Or do we need to have the...
You can say whatever you'd like to say, Ms. Hummel.
Okay. So I guess what my opinion about all of this, and I have to say I appreciate Dr. Heron's and Mr. Keever's explanation of their reticency in moving forward, because that was one of my comments at the last school board meeting when we had this discussion, and I said, since this is an administrative topic, an administrative issue, it's really important to me to know the superintendent's recommendation. I want to know, we are governance, but she's administration. So for me, I want to know that the people that have to actually implement this drastic change, regardless of whether I personally think we should move forward with it or not, I'm not the one that has to make it happen. She's the one that has to make it happen. And so for me, at our last meeting, I wanted to know clearly what were her thoughts about it, what were her concerns about it. Because if it's something that she feels is not the right time and place to move forward, when we still have learning loss, we still have some other issues. So for me, this is not a gotcha sort of situation. It's a clarification of the concerns of the people that have to carry this out. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Ortega, did you have anything to share?
Yeah, only that, I mean, it has been thoroughly confusing in the between this meeting now and the last time for this topic. We were moving in a certain direction, and now we're not. So I understand Dr. Beer's frustration. I'm not totally sure I understand the action he potentially wants us to take, but I do wonder why why the difference in explanation between last meeting and this meeting? I think that's what we're still not totally clear on.
If I may.
Yes, please.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Ortego, at the last meeting, in the last slide, we said we weren't ready to make a recommendation because there were barriers to moving forward. So I didn't make a recommendation at the last meeting. But then the conversation shifted because some board members really wanted to move forward. And Mr. Dahl, in response to that, suggested, well, let's support moving forward. But I never made a recommendation to move forward. And I do have genuine concerns that are barriers to doing it successfully, that I'd like to see some of those worked through, first of all, the Rec and Connect. And one other thing that stood out to me in the survey that we really hadn't talked about, there was data about potentially losing teachers as well, and I don't think we can afford to do that if we change tiers this year, especially when there's a crisis with staffing shortages as well. And the other piece is I really genuinely believe that I would like to see a better tier structure with better times presented to our community before we make this huge shift. That's why I was talking to staff today about getting more information from TransFinder and saying, can we get these tiers closer? Can we start even 10 to 15 minutes later and even end 10 to 15 minutes later in the afternoon and start later in the morning as well for elementary? Because I feel then you don't have younger children out when it's just so dark in the morning, waiting for a bus. And those were the sort of things we heard from our community in the survey. All those same considerations, and they weigh heavily upon me as we make a major decision before having more answers to some of the questions. Am I taking it off completely? No. But I really don't feel I can wholeheartedly make a recommendation to do this right now.
Thank you, Dr. Aaron. Okay. Just reading this from our board clerk. I apologize. Give me 1 second. So I believe the motion, Ms. Aller, is that we add an agenda item to our next meeting's action. And that action item would be, does the board support tonight's recommendation from the superintendent to not continue with start tier times in 23-24?
And what, can I ask a question?
That's the motion. Ms. Ortego.
If that motion were to prevail, what would that mean?
That was my next question.
Okay.
That was the question I couldn't get from Dr. Beers.
Okay.
What's step 2?
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Aller, can you read the motion and then call the roll?
Yes, sir. Okay. The motion is to add an agenda item to the next meeting's agenda. What action does the board support regarding the recommendation from the superintendent to not start tier times in school year 23-24? I will perfect that later.
So we're simply voting to add it to the agenda.
Add it to the agenda.
So for clarity, the board wants to add an agenda item, maybe depending on the vote right now, to go against my recommendation.
No, that's not step 2 yet. We didn't get that yet. Right. This first step, we don't know what step 2 is, but this first step is basically putting the board on record whether we agree with your recommendation or not.
Well,
Dr. Beers, is that your motion, or do you want to clarify?
No, that's exactly what it is.
Okay. Just a second, Ms. Aller. I think we have more questions. Ms. Hummel, just 1 second, Ms. Hummel, Ms. Ortego.
Are we voting right now simply to add it to the agenda to have this conversation again?
Essentially, but to really just be on record that we either agree or disagree with Dr. Heron's recommendation.
So regardless how the discussion goes next time, there would be a vote at the end of it to uphold or and to vote against adding it to the agenda would essentially be
We put an
same
end to
thing.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we put an end to it tonight. Ms. Donner, and then I apologize, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Donner hasn't had a moment to speak. Ms. Donner?
And I don't know if this is just parliamentary procedure, but you're not supposed to have a negative in a motion. So I don't know if the motion should be, because you wouldn't want to say not 23, 24. It should. Yeah, I don't know.
Do we uphold the superintendent's recommendation? End it, just end it there. Yeah.
So I guess I'm trying to amend the motion. Am I amending the motion?
Are you really going to do that to us?
Wait, I've got my Robert's rules now.
You are free to amend the motion if you would like to, Ms. Donner.
Oh, no, I need my reading glasses.
Or try to.
How do I do this?
How would you like to?
I move to amend the motion to say that we add an action item to our working session.
Okay.
I make a motion to add an agenda item to our working session to decide if we uphold the superintendent's recommendation for the change in tiered school times.
Okay, so we've got an amended motion to Dr. Beers' motion. Essentially is the same motion but a little bit cleaner, and it does not include a school year. Is there a second to this motion?
Second.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the motion.
Right, do we have a second to the amended motion?
Could you repeat the amendment?
Yes, we will. Ms. Aller, can you repeat the amended?
Yes, the motion is to amend the motion previously stated to say that, to state that we add an action item to our work session agenda on March 7th.
I don't understand a word. You're going to have to repeat it. Correct.
Okay, I'm sorry, Dr. Beers. It's a motion to amend the previous motion to say that we're adding an action item to our next work session agenda to decide if we are going to uphold the superintendent's recommendation or a change in tier school times.
What a system.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Is there a second? Thank you, Ms. Hundley.
Excuse me. I still did not hear the amendment.
Yes, I understand that, Dr. Beers.
I can understand everything you say. Could you repeat the amendment for me so I do hear it?
Yes, Dr. Beers, we will do that. Can I have that, please?
Yes, sir.
I'm going to read it from your pad, please. A little bit of patience with me, Dr. Beers. Thank you.
Do you want me to type it out?
I've waited a long time.
We're going to wait a few more minutes. Oh, come on.
You'd like for me to type it quickly?
Oh, dear.
Is it shorthand?
I'm happy to type it, sir, if you'd like.
All right, I think it says, Ms. Donner's amended motion to uphold the superintendent's recommendation to move to amend the motion to say that we add, oh my goodness.
Sorry, I was writing fast.
You should have gotten it.
Come speak from my mic, please. What was that? Can you email, Dr. Beers, do you have your email up?
What?
Do you have your email up?
Okay, can you hear me clearly now, Dr. Beers?
I can hear you good.
Okay. Okay.
The motion is to amend the previous motion to say that we add an action item to our next work session agenda to decide if we will uphold the superintendent's recommendation for change in tier school start times.
So what this does, Dr. Beers, is it does not include a school year. It's essentially the same as your motion. It does not include a school year.
Does not use what?
The only thing it does, it doesn't include the school year, 23-24. It's essentially your motion just cleaned up a little bit.
No, yeah,
We're good?
here isn't that, what I wanted to,
Okay. Okay.
it's more a case of, I think, the board's, whether the board supports the recommendation.
Right.
So
So both serve that. Ms. Donner's amended motion does not include a year. We're going to take action on that before we move on to yours, Dr. Beers. And Ms. Aller, please, the roll on the amended motion.
I wanted to.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Hummel, I didn't see you there. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to say, if you're voting this down, that just means you just don't want it on the agenda next time. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's the amendment, though.
So a vote of no or nay or whatever means.
Well, stand by. Read the motion one more time for Ms. Hummel. Ms. Hummel, can you hear Ms. Aller?
Yeah, you're fine.
Go ahead, Ms. Aller.
The motion is to amend the previous motion to say that we add an action item to our next work session agenda to decide if we uphold the superintendent's recommendation for change in tier school start times.
So, Ms. Hummel, a no vote says that you uphold the superintendent's recommendation.
No.
Okay.
No.
That's not right.
We're amending.
It just means it's not going to go.
Read it one more time for us, please. For my sake this time.
The motion is to amend the previous motion that we're going to add an action item to our next work session agenda to decide if we will uphold the superintendent's recommendation for a change in tier school start times.
So if you say no, you do not want to add an action item. So you would be upholding the superintendent's recommendation. A no vote supports the superintendent.
You can't conflate the two. Sorry, I'm out of order.
Go ahead, Doctor.
Sorry. I think you wouldn't want to conflate the two. Well, because you're just really voting on if you want it on the agenda. I guess then the cause of that, if it's not on the agenda, then we're not going to discuss it.
Right.
So I don't think we're saying we're upholding her recommendation. We're just saying that we're not going to discuss it again.
Sure. Yep. I mean, that's the same thing, but I get your point.
That's what I understood.
You understand, Ms. Hummel?
Yes, I just wanted that clarified.
Yeah.
And I agree with Mrs. Donner that I do think there is a slight difference.
Okay. Is everybody good?
First, we're just voting to amend the motion,
The
and then
first
we're voting for
is
the
the
motion.
amendment, yes, if we get to the second, yeah. Ms. Aller.
Mrs. Donner.
Nay.
Ms. Hummel.
Nay.
Mrs. Hunley.
Nay.
Mrs. Ortego.
Nay.
Mrs. Young.
Aye.
Dr. Beers.
Aye.
And Mr. Dow.
No. And Ms. Aller, would you count the votes?
Yes, sir. That is 5 nays and 2 ayes.
So we'll move to the amended motion fails. We'll move on to the motion on the floor. Could you read that motion again, Ms. Aller?
Yes, sir.
I think it essentially includes a school year.
It did, sir. The original motion was to add an agenda item to the next work session agenda for the board to show support for the superintendent's recommendation to change school tier start times in school year 23-24.
Is there further discussion on that first motion, the original motion? Okay, Ms. Aller?
Dr. Beers. Mrs. Donner,
Nay.
Ms. Hummel,
Nay.
Mrs. Hunley,
No.
Mrs. Ortigo,
No.
Mrs. Young,
Aye.
Mr. Dowell.
No. Thank you, Ms. Aller. Would you count those votes?
Yes, sir. That is 5 nays and 2 ayes.
Okay, so the motion does fail. And we're going to move on to item 10.1, our board member comments. If I can start with Ms. Donner to my right.
Thank you. So have the opportunity to hang out with some spiders, some rams, and some little patriots this past week. Had a wonderful opportunity to do school visits and just enjoyed seeing all the children at Matthew Whaley and just getting in the classrooms to see the innovative way we're just teaching. I got into a room with kindergartners and they were learning to spell the word from by moving their bodies, and so it's just a really interesting way to see them do that. Really enjoyed spending time in this building. It was Valentine's Day, so seeing all of the candygrams being handed out and just the way that our school resource officer participated in that is really just an intricate part of the school. And then lastly, spending time at Lafayette with the Rams and having the opportunity to see a lot of our arts programs. So we got to see the band room, the theater, as well as the art, some of the art classes. So just wonderful time, and I appreciate the principals and staff for making that happen. And then lastly, with our career readiness group, there was the Career Connections Fair that was last week, and it was phenomenal. We had over 40 companies attend. We had lots of students there, some dragged by their parents, some dragged their parents, and some just came on their own, and they really, the interaction as I walked and talked to as many of those employers, they were just so excited that kids were asking great questions and really interested in learning, so it was a wonderful opportunity. And I just want to say congratulations to all of our teachers that got that next level of certification recognition, and to Mrs. Aller for just keeping us in line and taking our motions like on the fly today. So just showing what a wonderful clerk we have. So thank you. And that's all my comments.
Ms. Donner, Ms. Hundley.
Okay, sorry, but not sorry. I have a lot of things. So spring is coming with concerts and plays. And Ms. Hummel and I got to go to Over the River and Through the Woods with Lafayette, and it was fabulous. So please support our fine arts when you start seeing those come out. Got to go hand out foundation grants. We had a lot of teachers and assistants and staff win those, and I can't wait to go back to see them in action, because one preschool, shout out to Miss Smith's class, her little preschoolers got community helper outfits with the tools and the books and things they want to grow up to be in the community. So I can't wait to come see them all dressed for success. James River, Miss Young and I got to go to James River. It was Kindness Week, and the kids were they were just giddy with kindness. And I got to eat lunch with a third grade bunch who complimented me on my age and then said, "But why are you so old with braces?" So, so that was kids say the darndest things, right? And then James Blair and Hornsby, got to go there, and just to hear the administration talk about the joy of coming to work warmed my heart. And even the teachers had made posters at Hornsby of their why, and they were just beautiful posters. Also, Hornsby, I saw CTE in action, and I saw the art students in action, and just to see students enjoying the day and learning new concepts. They were taking watercolor and adding alcohol and salt to them and watching how the things changed. Congratulations to the National Board Certified Teachers. As a former National Board teacher myself, I know the hard work that went into that, so definitely congratulations. The elephant in the room, I like that saying. I love elephants, but elephants are highly intelligent animals with complex emotions, so tonight we definitely saw that. I definitely when I think of this, I think of hard questions and hard answers, and I think that good questions are asked, and it's to our best to have open, courageous conversation about those questions. I would like to definitely sit down in the late spring, because that's when we get all our data from how the kids are doing, and so we can look back at the report and look at the statistics and data and compare now to what was last year's report. So apples to apples instead of apples to oranges in some aspects. And things change. The reason why I say we have to wait till then, I mean, things are changing on the dime as far as teachers. We hire 10 one week and 20 gone the next. That's an exaggeration, but things just change. Data changes, report changes. So I really want to be able to sit down with our strategic plan for that one section and look at what does our data say now, and then look at it that way. And I think we can come together and be creative. We're getting things from the state. Other divisions are doing things, and I think we can. I don't have a problem stealing from other divisions. Everything doesn't work. Some things may work there that don't work here, but I'm excited, and I also just believe and hopeful that we can get there. We just have to work together and not against each other. That's all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hundley. Dr. Beers, are you ready?
Yeah. I recognize the hard work and the difficult decision. So now I recommend going forward with a different start dates. I just don't agree with the decision. It was one of the reasons I campaigned to be on the school board, that this issue has been bounced around for now really over 20 years now. And it's, on several occasions, it came awfully close to being implemented, but it sort of died on the table. So I'm somewhat disappointed with the board. I recall a number of conversations I've had with board members who clearly indicated that they wanted to see a change in the start times. But when it came to actually having to deal with that reality, I guess it was too uncomfortable, too difficult to deal with that, and so if I put you in a difficult position, I apologize for that. I just felt really strongly about this, and had hoped that before the end of my term, that this might have come to fruition. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Beers. Ms. Hummel?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I was Miss Hunley's date for a lot of things the past couple weeks, and we went to Hornsby together. We did the WJCC Awards Foundation grants together, and we went to Lafayette's theater production, which was just wonderful. Because I work full time, I don't have the opportunity to get out and about as much as some of my colleagues, but when I do, I really, really appreciate being able to get into the schools and visit with the principals and visit with see the special arts and the sporting events and all of those things. So I just appreciate the opportunity to be back in the schools and just be able to participate to the degree that I'm able to. And let me see, I also really enjoyed the Bray School. It was last Friday, and we have just, I pinch myself for us living in Williamsburg with all the history that we have here, and to know that one of the first schools for African Americans were right here in our backyard, and that we are discovering more and more about it every day. It's now going to be in Colonial Williamsburg.
Duke of Gloucester Street or wherever they were moving the school, that had the names of all of the children who were educated in the Berea School back in the 1600s. So I just thought that was wonderful, and it was just one of those things that makes it cool to live in this area of the country, and to know that we, as a school division, we're still struggling, right? We're still struggling with what was happening in the 1600s and the 1700s, and we're always striving to improve and try to make things better for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hummel. Ms. Young.
Right. Thank you. First of all, one of the things that I really enjoyed during the past week is I had an opportunity to visit 4 schools and talking and reconnecting with principals. It's always an opportunity to sit down with the principal and talk to them about their school and see how excited they are about the accomplishments of their students and the way they are moving things forward. So I want to thank Mrs. White from Stonehouse, Mrs. Washington from James River. I really enjoyed that discussion. Mr. Rice from Lafayette, and I apologize for not wearing that bright yellow shirt, and Mrs. Newcomb from War Hill, because that was just exciting to listen to them and how much they love their students and the goals and aspirations they have for them. And then the second thing, along with one of the things about progressing in your profession for a teacher to get national board certification is a huge accomplishment. And it's wonderful to see that we celebrated those 3 teachers tonight. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Listening to my board colleagues, it's just kind of flooding back to me how much there was to offer, how much there was to engage with our school division over the last several weeks. And it reminds me of Hornsby's National History Day that they engage in every year. And I had the distinct privilege to be a guest judge for some middle school students. I was corrected that yes, this did occur. This was around when I was in middle school, and unfortunately, I was kind of in my own space, and I guess it just skipped past me. But it's akin to a science fair for history people. I'll put it that way, which I'm a history person, and it was just really cool to see these kids really be thoughtful and be creative in their task. And so I got to judge on warfare. There was 4 groupings of students who put together presentations that took them 4 or 5 months to build and put together. They had primary and secondary resources, 23, 24 different sources. It was really incredible the length of work that they put into it, and they were very well prepared. So I'm really looking forward to being a part of that again and seeing it continue to develop at Hornsby and perhaps at other schools too, that they pick it up. Listening to our speakers this evening, I did want to first lead off by saying that the Village Initiative, we appreciate every single community member in Williamsburg, James City County that lends their time to go into our schools and tutor our students, to lend an ear, to just be that trusted adult in a student's life in our schools. And many of those that are engaged with the Village Initiative, they do that alongside parents from the other perspective on equity and inclusion, or whatever you want to call what happened this evening. So for my part, I appreciate every single person. I think, and I could speak on behalf of our board, that we appreciate every single person that comes into our schools with no agenda, but they care about students and they want to serve the student, they want to serve families, and they want to see students succeed, and to see that glimmer in their eye that, yes, I can do this thing. I can be a student. I can learn and do and go on to college or go into a career, go into the military, whatever their future might be, but then be excited about that. And so for every single person, Village Initiative, or anyone else, thank you for being a part of that. Some things were said, though, that brought me pause. such as Alliance Village Initiatives, Alliance with the School Division. Apart from that every other school, or excuse me, community member can be a part of lending their time in our schools. That's the crux. That's the where it really kind of meets the road for us as far as an alliance with the Village Initiative. There was another thing stated from someone else that we would like, this individual said, for the school board's attorney to weigh in on findings of the equity report. That this is not a school board report. This is the Village Initiative's report, that they come and use public comment to apprise us of their findings using data that they come into and bring into their mode of thinking. And so I just wanted to dispel some perhaps wrong ideas about the relationship with the school board, the school division, and the Village Initiative. While we appreciate what they do for students in the schools and really encourage them to be all that they can be, their report is their own. Their data sets are brought into being, I'm not sure how, but I think Ms. Hundley has a good point that as we look at in the springtime SOL findings and ACT and all these other things, how does that relate to our own findings last year and prior to our shutdown in 2020, look at 2018, 2017, how are we progressing against our own findings that we do know and trust? Because we have data analytics and we got data professionals that are tabulating these things. There's a methodology in place within our own central office. So I think that Ms. Hunley is absolutely right. We want to make sure that we're reaching our own benchmarks and even extending those as we can. I want to move on to item 11. Did I skip you? Ms. Ortega, you get the final word.
I will go quickly because I don't want to be the person that makes everyone stay late. But I just wanted to mention a few things briefly. I also had the chance to visit several schools this week at Matthew Whaley, Stonehouse, and War Hill. I got to see some just amazing work in action, amazing school environments. Got to get to know the principals who were all delightful. So thank you to all those principals who took time out of their incredibly busy day to walk around and show me their schools that they're also proud of. I also was able to, like Mr. Dow, participate in National History Day being a judge, which was a wonderful experience. And I think that it's an incredibly valuable way to allow students to experience history. For those of you who don't know briefly, there are a lot of different ways that students can present a history project that fits into a theme. And they can use a lot of artistic and creative talents that they possess to interact with history using primary and secondary sources. And it's so critical to foster a lifelong love of history, because history provides the context for our present, and understanding history allows us to determine our future. And so I just want to thank Rachel Rudis and Jen Brooks from Hornsby Middle School, because that was a lot of extra work, and their students are incredibly lucky. And congratulate all the students who participated, because this was extracurricular. They didn't have to. This was all voluntary and a tremendous amount of work. So congratulations to every student who participated. And I just briefly mentioned, I know Ms. Hummel mentioned the Bray School event. It was an incredibly moving event. If anyone has not heard of the Bray School or doesn't really know what it is or was, please look into it. It's in our town. Please Google it and read about it. It's an incredible story, and we're so lucky to have it right in our backyard or front yard, depending on where you live. And just wanted to also briefly mention the retreat that we had as a board. We've said it amongst ourselves, but I also want to say publicly that it was a wonderful growing time for all of us. We did actually have some very open and at times difficult conversations amongst ourselves, but the amount of respect and openness and the desire to learn from each other and move forward as a group, as a whole, was palpable. And so I just want to say that publicly and thank my colleagues publicly. And then very briefly, just want to thank every speaker who came out. Every voice is valuable. Every voice is part of our community, and we need to hear from everyone. And just thank you for taking a time out of your evening. It's not an easy thing to do. It's a sacrifice. And so I thank you as a member of this community for your time and being part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ortega. We're going to move on to item 11, upcoming events. On March 9th at 6:30, there's a Special Education Advisory Committee meeting here at Central Office, actually next door at Central Office, room 309. And then March 15th at 8:30 in the morning, there's a Policy Committee meeting in room 108 of Central Office. And then on March 29th, the 21st Century and Career Ready Advisory Committee meets at 3:30 in the afternoon, room 300 at Central Office. And then our upcoming meetings, on March 7th, we have closed session beginning at 4, followed by public hearing on the superintendent's proposed operating budget at 4:30 at Central Office room 300, and then our work session and action items to follow the hearing, directly after the hearing. March 17th, there's a joint meeting with our city funding partners and county funding partners at 8:30 in the morning at the Stryker Center. And then on March 21st at 6 p.m. our closed session begins in room 300, followed by our regular meeting at 6:30 right back here in the gymnasium. And with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.